A new day again. It's a sunny day. Last night, a very curious, a very, I know how to say it, but something very interesting. My biggest sister, my eldest sister, told us don't drink milk because milk is a kind of food in Chinese, yin, yin food. It's not uh, for us. It's only for a little child. They can drink milk. If we drink milk, they will damage our health. And it's the factor that Japanese Japanese um, depressing people and the suicide people, increase this year. It's because they drink so ridiculous, and we laughed a lot. So funny. Sometimes I don't know, the Chinese medicine, they have be a little bit good thing, but a lot of bad thing. And they believe in what they believe. I think, like religion, you believe this, he believe that, then we need to allow others to believe in what they believe. But my sister, she was so angry we don't believe her. It's so funny. Anyway, let's learn English. I say, I'm sorry. I was such a beast. I couldn't help it. Let's make it up. But he knew he would never be able to do it. He was afraid that Rose would sneer at him. That's so bad. He was afraid that Rose would sneer at him. He was angry with himself, and when she shut him in a little, while afterward he seized up the first opportunity to quarrel with him. He was angry with himself, and when she uh, came in a little while afterward, he seized upon the first opportunity to quarrel with him. Philip had a fetish, fetish instinct, fiendish, fiendish instinct for discovering other people's raw spot, and was able to say things that rankled because they were tried the last word. Fiendish. No barking. Oh, this is about my my dog, my my Daisy. She buried a she buried a piece of bone, and she dig it out this morning and eat it outside. And Miss Sherry, the other girl, she want to go out to get it. No, you can't get it because this is Bessie's 残酷的。Philip had a Philip had a fiendish instinct for discovering people's raw spot. I heard Rose talking about you to Myla just now, he said. Myla said, I heard Rose talk about you to Myla just now. he said. Miller said, "Why didn't you kick him? I would teach him manners." And Rose said, "I didn't like to. Damn it, cripple." Philip suddenly becomes scarlet. He could not answer, for there was a lump in his throat that almost choked him. Philip was moved into sixth, but he hated school now with all his heart, and having lost his ambition, cared nothing whether he did ill or well. He awoke in the morning with a sinking heart, because he must go through another day of drudgery. He was tired of having to do things because he was told, and the restriction irked him, not because they were unreasonable, but because they were restriction. That's irk. Let's see, is it irk? Yes, this is irk, 烦恼、激怒。Irked him. No. The restriction irked him, not because they were unreasonable, but because they were restrictions. Oh my God, my dog. Girls, no barking. Yen. He yearned for freedom. He was very repeating things. Weary. 疲惫的、疲倦的
Weary.
He was weary of repeating things. He was very 厌倦。He was weary of 厌倦。He was weary of repeating things that he knew already, and of the hammer way, for the sake of a thick-witted fellow, at something that he understood from the beginning, and of the hammer way, hammering, 捶打是的 and for the sake of a thick-witted fellow, thick-witted fellow. 头脑 thick-witted. Let's think. Thick-witted 到底是聪明的还是机智 ？Thick-witted fellow. Let's see. Thick-witted fellow. 头脑迟钝的 thick-witted fellow. 头脑迟钝的 The sake of a thick-witted fellow at something that he understood from the beginning. With Mr. Perkins, you could walk or not as you choose. He was at once eager and abstract. The sixth form room was in a part of the old abbey, a part of the old abbey which had been restored, had a Gothic window. A Gothic window. 哦，哥特式。Okay, I'm coming. Philip tried boredom by drawing this over and over again, and sometimes out of his head he drew the great tower of the. So annoying. 你们俩谁要进来还是出去？在一起。Sorry，你们俩这到底要怎么样？又，再叫妈妈就不理你了哈。Philip tried to cheat his boredom by drawing this over and over again, and sometimes out of his head he drew the great tower of the gateway that led into the precinct. Precinct. He had a knack for drawing. Oh, is that? Yeah, knack. 窍门，诀窍。He had a 技巧。He had a knack for drawing. Aunt Louisa, during her youth, had painted in watercolor, and she had several albums filled with sketches of churches, old bridges, and picture picturesque cottage. I read this. We learned this word. I forgot how to read.
Picturesque. Picturesque.
Picturesque. Picturesque. Picturesque. Old bridges and picturesque cottage. Oh my God. They were often shown at the vicarage tea parties. A paint box as a Christmas present, and he had started by copying her pictures. He copied them better than anyone could have expected, and presently he did little pictures of his own. Mrs. Curry encouraged him. It was a good way to keep him out of mischief, and later on his sketches would be useful for bazaars. Really? For bazaar. Oh.
Bazaar.
And later on, his sketches would be used for 百货商店市场。哦，市场，百货商店。Two or three of them had been framed and hung in his bedroom. But one day, at the end of the morning's work, Mr. Perkins stopped him as he was longing out of the form room. I want to speak to you, Carrie. Philip waited. Mr. Perkins ran his lean his bright beard and looked at Philip. He seemed to be thinking of what he wanted to say. "What's the matter with you, Carrie?" he said abruptly. Philip, flashing, looked at him quickly, but knowing him well by now, without answering. He waited for him to go on. "I've been dissatisfied with you lately. You've been slack and inattentive. You seem to take no interest in your work. It's been slovenly and bad." Sloven， 不整洁的、马虎的、不修边幅的。It's been slovenly， 懒散的，懒散的啊。It's been slovenly. Let's see, slovenly. It's been slovenly and bad. It's been slovenly and bad. Just he don't like it. I'm very sorry, sir, said Philip. Is that all you have to say for yourself? Yes, for yourself. Sulkily. Look down. Sulkily. Sulkily. Let's see what's sulky. Sulky. 生气的、愠怒的、生闷气的、生气的。Sulkily. How could he answer that he was bored to death? How could he answer that he was bored to death? You know, this term you will go down instead of up. I shan't give you a very good report. Philip wondered what he would say if he knew how the report was treated. It arrived at breakfast. Mr. Curry glanced at it differently and passed it over to Philip. There's your report. You'd better see it what it says, he remarked, as he ran his finger through the wrapper of a catalogue of second-hand book. The wrapper of a catalogue of second book. Catalogue 种类 Catalogue 目录大学编栏目录 Catalogue There's your report. You'd better see what it says, he remarked, as he ran his finger through the wrapper of a catalogue of second-hand book. Philip read it. Is it good? Asked Aunt Louisa. Not so good as I deserve, answered Philip, with a smile, giving it to her. I'll read it afterward when I've got my spectacles, she said. But after breakfast, Mary Ann came in to say the butcher was there, and she generally forgot. But after breakfast, Mary Ann came in to say the butcher was there, and she generally forgot. Mr. Perkins went in. Mr. Perkins, I'm disappointed with you, and I couldn't understand. I know you can do things if you want to, but you don't seem to want to anymore. I was going to make you a monitor next term, but I think I'd better wait a bit. He didn't like the thought of being passed over. He tightened his lips. And there's something else, and there's something else. You must begin thinking of your scholarship now. You won't get anything unless you start working very seriously. Philip was um, irritated, irritated, irritated. Philip was He was angry with the headmaster and angry with himself. I don't think I'm going up to Oxford, he said. Why not? I thought your idea was to be ordained. 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 I've changed my mind. Why? Philip didn't answer. Mr. Perkins, holding himself oddly as he always did, like a feature in one of Perugino's pictures. Perugino's pictures. Perugino. Let's see who this is. Perugino.佩鲁基诺，佩鲁基诺，意大利的名画家。Perugino， 意大利的名画家。Perugino's picture, drawing his finger thoughtfully, he looked at Philip as though he was trying to understand, and then abruptly told him he might go. Apparently, he was not satisfied, for one evening a week later, when Philip had to go into his study with some papers, he resumed the conversation, but this time he adopted a different method. He spoke to Philip not as a schoolmaster with a boy, but as one human being with another. He didn't seem to care now that Philip's work was poor, that he ran smartened against the rival of carrying off the scholarship necessary for him to go to against keen rival of carrying off the scholarship necessary for him to go to Oxford. The important matter was his changed intention about his life afterward, himself to revive his eagerness to be ordained. With infinite skill, he worked on was easier since he was himself genuinely moved. Philip's change of mind distress, and he really thought he was throwing away his chance of happiness in life, for he knew not what. His voice was very persuasive, and Philip, easily moved by the emotion of others, very emotional himself, notwithstanding a placid exterior, placid exterior, exterior, exterior,
exterior,
exterior,
exterior,
why put a placid exterior, placid, 平静的，温和的。His face, partly by nature, but also from the habit of all these years at school, seldom except by his quick flashing showed what he felt. Philip was deeply touched by what the master said. He was very grateful to him for the interest he showed, and he was conscience stricken and he was conscience-stricken by the grief which he felt his behavior caused him. It was subtly flattering to know that with the whole school to think about Mr. Perkins should trouble with him, but at the same time something else in him, like another person standing at his elbow, clung desperately towards. I won't. Great. It was subtly, no 不 subtly 微妙的
Suddenly.
Su-
Suddenly.
subtly
Suddenly.
subtly
Suddenly.
subtly subtly 微妙的 Okay, wait a minute. No, 微妙 subtly. It was subtly 微妙地了，那我就不能说的了。Flattering. Oh my God. Flattering. 字命不凡的，实现了 flattering. It was subtly flattering to know that with the whole school to think about Mr. Perkins should trouble with him, but at the same time something else in him, like another person standing at his elbow, clung desperately towards. I won't. He felt himself slipping. He was powerless against the weakness that seemed to well up in him. It was like the this is about the bone. At last, Mr. Perkins put his hand on Philip's shoulder. I don't want to influence you, he said. You must decide for yourself. Pray to Almighty God for help and guidance. Of the headmaster's house, there was a light rain falling. He went under the archway. He went under the archway that to the precinct. There was not a soul there, and the rooks were silent in the elm. And the rooks were silent in the elm. He walked round slowly. He felt hot. He felt hot, and the rain did him good. He thought over all that Mr. Perkins had said, calmly know that he was withdrawn from the forward of his personality, and he was thankful he had not given away from the fever. Fervor. It is fervor, 热情、热烈。And My poor dog, she got something wrong with. I'm treating her teeth, but not recover wholly. She still has difficulty to bite, to chew bones. Yeah, that's why she buried the bone, and she take it out and chew it, but it's difficult for her for now. And Sherry, she won't get the bone, and he was thankful he had not given way. In the darkness, he could buy the mass of the cathedral. He hated it now because of the irksomeness of the long service which he was forced to attend. The anthem was the the anthem was interminable. The anthem was interminable, and you had to stand drearily while it was being sung. You could not hear the droning sermon. You could not hear the droning sermon, and your body twitched because you had to sit still when you wanted to move about. Then Philip thought of the two service every Sunday. He hated it now because of the irksomeness of the long service which he was forced to attend. The anthem was the anthem, an anthem, 圣歌. The anthem was interminable. Oh, yes.
interminable,
Interminable.
interminable,
terminable 是终结的 interminable 是
interminable,
interminable. The anthem was interminable, and you had to stand drearily while it was being sung. You could not hear the drawing. You could not hear the droning some. Droning.
droning, droning,
You could not hear the droning some. You could not hear the droning some, and your body twitched because you could not hear the droning some, and your body twitched because you had to sit still when you wanted to move about. Then Philip thought of the two services every Sunday at Blackstable. The church was bare and cold, and there was a smell all about one of pomade and starched clothes. Was smell up all about one of pomade 润发油 starched 润发油 about pomade and starched clothes. The curate preached. The curate preached once, and his uncle preached once. As he grew up, he had learned to know his uncle. Philip was intolerant. Philip was downright and intolerant, and he could not understand that a man might sincerely say things as a clergyman which he never acted up to as a man. Outraged him. The deception outraged him. Deception. 欺骗 deception. The deception outraged him. His uncle was a weak and selfish man, whose chief desire it was to be saved trouble, whose, 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 whose chief desire it was to be saved trouble. Mr. Perkin had spoken to him of the beauty of a life dedicated to the service of God, dedicated to the service of God. Dedicated to the service of God. Philip knew what sort of lives the clergy lead in the corner of East Anglia, which was his home. There was the vicar of Whitestone, a parish a little way from Blackstable. He was a bachelor, and to give himself something to do, had lately taken up farming. The local paper constantly reported the cases he had in country court against and that. Liberals, he would not pay their wages to or tradesmen whom he accused of cheating them. Scandal said he starved his cows, and there was much talk about some general action which should be taken against him. Then there was the vicar of. Philip knew what sort of life the clergy led in the corner of the East Anglia, which was his home. There was the vicar of Whitestone, a parish a little way from Blackstable. He was a bachelor and gave himself something to do, and later taken up farming. The local people too had lately taken up farming. The local cases he had in the country court against this one and that. Liberals, he would not pay their wage to, or accused of cheating him. Scandal said he starved his cows, and there was such talk about some general action which should be taken against him. Then there was the vicar of Fern, a bearded fine figure of a man. His wife had been forced to leave him because of his cruelty, and she had filled the neighborhood with stories of his morality, immorality.
Immorality.
Oh my God. Immorality with story of his immorality. Solar, the vicar of Solar, a tiny hamlet by the sea. The vicar of Solar, a tiny hamlet by the sea. Hamlet, what hamlet? hamlet, 村子. A tiny hamlet by the sea was to be seen every evening in the public house. A tiny hamlet by the sea was to be seen every evening in the public house. A stone throw from his vicarage, and the church wardens had been to Mr. Curry to ask his advice. The church warden. There was not a soul for any of them to talk to except small farmers or fishermen. There was not a soul for any of them to talk to except small farmer or fisherman. There was a long winter evening when the wind blew, whistling drearily through the leafless trees, and all around they saw nothing but the bare monotony of monotony, monotony, 单调的 the bare monotony of plant field, bare monotony of plant field, and there was power lack of any work that seemed to matter. Every king in their characters had free play. Every king, or just ink, king.
Kink.
Every king in their characters, every kink, 纠结头发肌肉筋 every kink. Oh my god, today, sorry. Every kink in their characters had free play. There was nothing to restrain them. They grew narrow and eccentric. Narrow and eccentric. 我觉得应该是自大的，古怪的 eccentric in Little Princess.
Eccentric.
Eccentric, 古怪的。They grow narrow and eccentric. Philip knew all this, but in his young intolerance, he didn't offer it as an excuse. At the thought of leading such a life. She shivered at the thought of leading such a life. He wanted to get out into the world. Mr. Perkins soon saw that his words had no effect on Philip. Mr. Perkins soon saw that his words had no effect on Philip, and for the rest of the term ignored him. He wrote a report which was vitriolic.尖刻的 vitriolic which was vitriolic 尖刻的 vitriolic. Yes, you see how vitriolic. He wrote a report which was vitriolic. When it arrived, and Aunt Louisa asked Philip what it was like, he answered cheerfully, "Rotten." When it arrived, and Aunt Louisa asked Philip what it was like, he answered cheerfully, "Rotten, is it?" said the vicar. "I must look at it again. Do you think there's any use in my staying on at Tercanbury? I should have thought it would be better if I went to Germany for a bit." What has put that in your head?" said Aunt Louisa. "Don't you think it's rather a good idea?" Sharp had already left King's School and had written to Philip from Hanover. Sharp had already left King's School and had written to Philip from Hanover. He was really starting life, and it made Philip more restless to think of it. He felt he could not bear another year of restraint. "But then you wouldn't get a scholarship. I haven't a chance of getting one anymore, and besides, I don't know that I particularly want to go to Oxford. But if you are going to be ordained, Philip," Aunt Louisa exclaimed in dismay. "I've given up that idea long ago." Mrs. Carey looked at him with startled eyes, and then, used to self-restraint, he poured out another cup of tea for his uncle. They didn't speak. In a moment, Philip saw